So to start with, I think to truly be able to answer this question, we have to look at what is capitalism. What are we really talking about here? The Google definition will tell you it's an economic and political system in which a country's trade and industry are controlled by private owners for profit rather than by the state. Allowing everyone to make profit seems like a great thing, and it was in contrast to the monarchy system before it. Unfortunately, due to perhaps human tendencies and hierarchy, we land in the spot we are in today. But couldn't you say we saw it coming? The system of capitalism has always exploited people. The first Wall Street market sold slaves, both African and Native American. The system of capitalism depends on cheap labor. This is why when we outlaw slavery, we get child labor. And when we outlaw that, we get labor exploited to the global south, where you can exploit people in sweatshop factories. And who does this affect most? People of color, women, children. Malcolm X said you can't have capitalism without racism. I would add you can't have capitalism without sexism, ableism, and all other isms that exploit oppressed people. Take, for example, the wage gap. Everyone says that a woman makes 77 cents to a man's dollar, but that's white woman, and black woman makes 67 cents, and Latino woman make I believe it's like 59 cents to a white man's dollar. But do you think if we fix that, we would actually solve inequality? No, they would find someone else to oppress. That's always how it has been. That's always how it will be. Climate change is only a symptom of capitalism, and it's not just climate change. Ecosystems are collapsing, animals are going extinct, entire rainforests are being cut dry. As long as we measure progress by GDP, that's gross domestic product, when products come from a resource on a finite planet, we're screwed. It's entirely illogical to define our progress through consumption and growth. You cannot have this and consider anything about our system sustainable. Take, for example, tuna fish. Tuna fish are largely endangered, especially the yellowfin tuna. And right now, there's only, a few of them left, and yet one tuna fish, one yellowfin tuna, is worth like $500,000. And then you take someone like, for example, my uncle, a fisherman from Ethiopia, and he was telling me how much he wants to find that yellowfin tuna, and how he wants to be the last one on Earth to kill the last one on Earth. Because why? Because there's a financial profit for it. And when people are poor, what are they going to do? They're going to go after it. And so the entire system that we've set up, we've actually prioritized and profitized the killing of all endangered animals, all that is a finite resource. So a lot of people talk about, okay, well, if not we can still have capitalism, we can have a steady state economy. And a steady state economy is where you no longer increase your GDP and you keep it at a steady state. However, that's taking into account, that's forgetting about our American first world privilege. The average American uses 4.5 Earths. That means if everyone was to live like us, we would need 4.5 Earths to sustain ourselves. However, we don't have 4.5 Earths, which means the way that we live is actually preventing other people from eating and having water. And so when we talk about a steady state economy, we don't just need to cut our consumption in half, we need to cut it down to 1/4 of what we're using. And I think a lot of people push forth reforms, and sometimes reforms can be a good thing. Take, for example, Councilmember O'Brien's bill to unionize Uber workers, which is on a pathward to unionize all independent contractors, and the United States Chambers of Commerce got so scared that they sued the city all the way to the U.S. district courts. They brought it there on the first, and they said this is fundamentally a challenge to the free market. That's a good reform. When they're afraid that you're gonna alter the free market. Okay, that's the type of reform we need. But then there's also reforms that don't work, and I'm not saying that this is a bad thing, but I think we can also look towards, for example, before Columbus sailed to the United States, which was already discovered, we had that's when the divide between the rich and poor was so huge that the rich decided that they would start creating things like food banks and started giving food to the poor, not because they cared about them, but because they were afraid of a revolution. And so a lot of times we push for reforms that just prevent the necessary revolution. And so when you ask, can capitalism be fixed? I say no. Why would you want to? We're asking the wrong question when we ask, can capitalism be fixed? And I think it's really easy for white men to say, to just say, oh, we're gonna reform it because white men have the most to lose since they have the most power and privilege right now. But that's why you see women and people of color, and especially women of color, was like, no, we're not gonna reform our way out of this. This is our opportunity. And I think that instead of looking at as a problem, we should look at this as an opportunity. Here we have an opportunity from the system that is no longer working to create something we've never seen before. And a lot of people think that if you are an anti-capitalist, that makes you a socialist. And I don't have anything against socialism, but I'm not a socialist. In fact, we've seen socialism work before, we've seen communism work before, and we've seen capitalism work before, okay? And we see the issues that each system has. So I'm not interested in any system that's been here before. I think we need to completely change our framework in looking at some of these old systems and as if it's black and white. It's not. We can find entirely new systems, and I think that there's a lot of things that we can take from, for example, socialism. But then you take, for example, Scandinavia, and something that we don't talk about when we look at Scandinavia as a city on the hill is how racist they are. My father, as an Ethiopian refugee, was actually put in jail in Sweden when he went to ask to stay longer because his visa was up. Okay, so like Sweden, sure, they're all nice to you if you look like them, but if you don't, then you're not getting any of those benefits. So I think that there's flaws in every single system. And I think that one thing that we should look towards the new system is look to the wisdom of the indigenous people who had a system before us that was working before we came and destroyed it. I think one of the system, something in the new system I think is critical, and I think a lot of people have a hard time thinking about this, is I think whatever new system we have, I do not think there should be money. Because anytime there's money, we have corruption. Anytime there's money, we have greed. And so for me, I look to kind of a funny example, but I went to this festival. It's been going on since the 60s. It's called the Rainbow Gathering, and there's a lot of problems with that festival, but one of the good things about the Rainbow Gathering is the fact that in the Rainbow Gathering, it's this huge festival. They meet in different state parks every time, and there's like thousands of people, and there's no money. And the interactions you have with strangers when there's no money being involved, it's no longer transactional. It's I'm actually gonna get to know you because I don't have to, oh, how much money do I have? Let me see what you're offering me. It completely changes the way that you interact with people. And I think there's other systems like time banking, which I think is a really good alternative to money, where time banking is essentially where you spend like volunteer time, you fix someone's house in exchange for a service of similar hours. So I think that we have a lot of models that we can look towards. I think that we have a lot of examples, and I think that we should be pushing for something we've never seen before because we know everything else has yet to work for everyone.